NHIF did not have a trust deficit. Kenyans had already warmed up towards NHIF. They had very much trust. Things like Linda Mama, the uptake was very high. The trust deficit is with SHA because already based on the amount of money being deducted, yet when Kenyans go to these facilities, the systems are not working. When approvals are made, the providers are also not paid their services. Okay. So what that tells you, this government was in haste to collect money from employed Kenyans, the 2.75, okay, where we don't know where the money goes, instead of first setting up structures.
You know, China, they have already defined their interest. In fact, what we should be asking ourselves as Kenyans is, on what strategy are we going to China? Because that's a fundamental question. Okay. Chinese know the strategy that is bringing them to Kenya. Okay. They have what we call the BRI project, BRI program, the Belt and Road Initiative, which essentially aims at connecting their market to, you know, like a circuit of some sort. So the Chinese are coming to us readily prepared, even mentally, knowing for us to negotiate with these people, we only need to meet threshold X. But you see, Kenyans, we are going there to beg even more.
Do not underestimate the silent majority. These are the people who don't come out in those campaign trails or those functions that people think about. And the silent majority are saying Ruto must go. Raila will go. And now we want a new crop of leaders who actually have empathy towards Kenyans.
Well, good evening. My name is Eugene Kwach, and this is the Power Table. Well, the Power Table is a conversation where we get to discuss things, politics, governance, economy, and issues, governance. All issues that actually are affecting you, our viewer. We get to discuss them on this particular seat conversation, the Power Table. Well, tonight I'm with two gentlemen and a lady, of course, and we're having a candid conversation on the issues that actually are affecting our country. My first guest is Beatrice Kairu. Beatrice Kairu is a former aspirant of the deputy gubernatorial position. And of course, she's also a policy and health economist, if I got it right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Asante sana Kwach.
Yes. And of course, my second guest is Anthony Samba Buluma. Anthony Samba Buluma is the CEO of the Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association. Also joining us for this conversation. Well, this conversation, we will be talking and looking at 5 critical issues. And one of them is the health equation, or the health question, which is the she, sha, shif. What does a common man understand this? And of course, on this concept. And of course, we also have the economy. Evidence leans towards high debt and cost of living crisis in Kenya. And of course, we then look at these issues, some of them, what does it portend for Kenya's future? We also ask questions around Ruto's China visit with the high debt looming. There's another one of the questions actually that people are asking. And of course, we also get to look at the NGCDF debate and the future of Ruto, Raila Park. These are some of the questions actually that we're going to look at on this conversation. Thank you so much, lady and gentleman, for joining us for this conversation. Permit me to start with you, lady, Beatrice Kairu. Because we're talking about the affairs of the state, and perhaps the first question will be, what is the state of affairs from your assessment?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kwach, for inviting me. And thank you for these conversations, because I believe Kenyans should actually have political conversations, because we are the employers of our leaders. So the current state of the country is not so good. It's actually becoming worse. Kenyans are burdened by so many economical issues, especially the high cost of living, especially the young people, high unemployment rates. SMEs are shutting down. Businesses are closing. Investors are actually shying away from dealing with our leaders. Recently, I think the president of a gas organization from Vietnam stated that our political leaders like talking and talking, speaking big words. You know, they're always having a microphone, but there's no execution. And he felt very much disappointed. And mind you, he met with William Ruto and Musalia Mudavadi. So that speaks volume about who our leaders are, because the president represents the leaders of this nation. So if an investor like such, who would have maybe brought a big industry into the country, shying away from coming to our country, that tells you means there will be no employment for our youth. Our youths are going to school, getting out of school, but they don't have a continuation of their future. And the youths are currently feeling that their life, all their future is being robbed. And now when you talk about the generation Alpha, who are after the generation Z, they're almost feeling hopeless because they're even wondering, why should I even go to school? Why should I even invest? Why should I even study? Because when I look at my brother who is a Gen Z, he's actually rioting against the government. When I look at my elder brother who is a millennial, has been jobless for the last 10 years. When I look at my mother who is a Generation X, she's complaining about loans she's not able to pay back. And when I look at my grandfather who is a boomer, even the pension, that person can actually not access it. And mind you, even the healthcare of that boomer is in shaky grounds as we speak today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Anthony, you are the CEO of Kenya Young Parliamentarian Organization, and of course you also represent the African Young Parliamentarian, also as the CEO. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. But the question is, because we've had a sit down with several youths, and we've talked about the future being the youth. But again, the question is that whether the youth themselves are actually even ready to take over the mantle of leadership from the old guards, and actually even to solve the problems and issues that have been bedeviling our country and our nation from the old guards. And actually, you know what has actually been happening. And we've talked about taxes. You saw about from the Gen Z revolution, they say we do not want more taxes. We talk about economic crisis and so on and so forth. Is the youth ready? And your assessment generally about the state of youth actually involvement in active politics?
Thank you for having me on the power table.
Yes.
I think the conversations around young people has always been, are you at the table or at the menu? Okay. I'm happy I'm part of the youth on the table shaping conversations that should be able to enrich our country. To come to your question, I think there are several things that I will say. One, context applies. Leadership is not necessarily defined by just age. It goes beyond age. It boils down to your ability to serve. Remember, those of us who are Christians, we subscribe to the doctrine of the greatest amongst us shall be the servant of all. So for young people to actually emerge, they must offer themselves in terms of serving, so as servitude elevates you to leadership position. And I feel like going by my interactions with many young people, going by what we've been watching on TV and happenings across the country, I think young people are more than ready for leadership. Leadership, like freedom, is not voluntarily given. You must demand for it. You must fight for that space, but with wisdom, so that you don't burn bridges that you may need to use again. In fact, wise men say, do not slam a door because you may want to come back. So don't damage relationships as you ascend to leadership. If anything, solidify a foundation of trust so that people can interact with you at a level where you're offering hope for the next generation. I also want to demystify or disabuse the notion that youth are leaders of tomorrow. I mean, leadership is a journey that begins today. Like anybody else, in that small space you're in, that is already manifestation of leadership. What we really need to start interrogating is the ability or the capacity of individuals to influence large numbers of people to do positive things. Because I think that has been missing in our context. If you go to probably established democracies, the reason why we look up to them is because they have systems that prepare their leaders so well that from elementary level, you're actually positioning yourself to be a responsible citizen, because that's the foundation of leadership, responsibility, and then accountability. And then building on that, now you come to the opportunity to take position. But you see, in our context, first is position, then everything else comes afterwards. Accountability, we need to track you down and see, Eugene, when you were young in your decision making, what kind of decisions were you making? What kind of interactions did you have with the people around you? So that if we're able to predict you, because a leader is predictable, in as much as they're able to project the future, you can predict their character. You can predict natural attributes about them. And I feel like we have quite a number of competent young people who, if presented with an opportunity,
Okay.
not just oratory
Okay.
opportunities,
Yes.
but opportunities of service,
Yes.
you would be amazed by what they can do. If you look at the Parliament of Kenya today,
Yes.
the outstanding legislators are the young people. Look at all the polls that are coming out.
Okay.
Best utilized, best managed, most progressive CDFs. It is the young leaders.
Okay.
Top 10.
Yes.
Always my membership, and I'm always proud of them.
Okay.
Because we set a good example
Okay.
so that other young Kenyans can be given an opportunity like my dear sister here who contested. And I want her not to give up.
Okay.
Still go for it again.
Okay. Yeah.
Even if it looks like it's delayed, let it not be a denial.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well said, actually. But now let us delve into the issues
Yeah.
at hand, actually. One of the critical issues that actually has raised a lot of controversy
Yeah.
and scrutiny
Yeah.
is the issue of health insurance fund.
Yeah.
We talk about Shif. Many Kenyans do not actually understand what this health insurance is.
Yeah.
How does it work? Is it even a way of is it even leading us to universal health coverage?
Yeah.
When we talk about universal health,
Yeah.
you understand. As a health economist,
Yeah.
what will you make of this health insurance? Was it even well thought? What does the government ought to do to make it even more acceptable
Yeah.
to even the people who do not even understand what it is?
Thank you very much. The shift from NHIF to SHA, that's what we call it, having NHIF having existed for a period of 60 years, it had its own faults, when it comes to things like administration, when it came to issues like coverage. So the current regime, that is the Kenya Kwanza government, decided to do an overhaul of the whole NHIF and now created what we call the Social Health Authority. But it was not well thought through because currently as we speak, even the system itself is not actually functioning properly. And recently the CS Health, that is Adan Duale, has already given a go-ahead, the 104 billion which Kenyans were fighting during the June 25th demonstration. We know in as much as they were revoking the finance bill, they're also talking about the Shif and the SHA. So you realize now he's saying every month they have to now release some money to go to the 104 bill, which is against the court orders, which was supposed to annul the deal. So you see the current government is so punitive to the point it is not actually listening to legal minds and even looking at the legal actions now. Be as it may, the introduction of SHA was not timely. Remember, the government is going through a deficit of the physical space. Remember, they are supposed to do a lot of austerity measures. But you see, when they're doing these austerity measures, Kenyans cannot feel where their money are going or where this money that is actually trying to be saved, where is it going in terms of services. So when NHIF came on board, it asked the government to actually just set aside 700 million to make its system better so that it can serve a wider range of Kenyans, and also to improve its structures. But the current regime saw a loophole where they could have what we call budgeted corruption. Recently, we saw the Auditor General saying that even the funds of Shif, where they are going into bank accounts that are separate from the consolidated fund, she has no access to those funds. She cannot even see how the utilization of those funds is actually going. Okay. So in essence, one way or another, that amount is actually going to pockets we do not know. Okay. But one aspect I would like to highlight is that the government looked at the in health, we look at the demand side and the supply side. So on the demand side, it's the citizens. Okay. So when the citizens goes to a hospital, whatever service they're seeking, it's authorized, they get the service and they go home. But on the supply side, these are the healthcare providers. The government is not paying them the claims. They're not paying the claims that these providers have actually provided. Recently, even the private association of healthcare facilities, as well as even public facilities. The NHIF debt that was there of around 33 billion up to date has not been paid, and yet the president 2 months ago declared he's going to pay. So in the coming of days, we are going to see the shutdown and auctioning of some of these facilities because of a debt crisis in these facilities. So already, if the supply side is already overwhelmed, it means even we as Kenyans will no longer have access to the same healthcare that the government is trying to talk about. UHC cannot come to fruition if even the supply side is not well catered for. Lastly, already the government is deducting the 2.75 from our salaries, and also to the informal sector. They are pushing these guys based on their gross income to contribute to some of these funds. So people are contributing, but the money is not playing the suppliers. These are the healthcare providers. So Kenyans are asking, that is what the Auditor General asked, where are the funds going? You are deducting us, but we cannot see where it is paying for the services. So already there is a public trust deficit when it comes to the social health insurance authority. So Kenyans are actually, they withdrew their social contract with the Kenya Kwanza government when it comes to the health reforms. And it's still an uphill task to bring on board the informal sector. And currently we are seeing 7% contribution in comparison to NHIF, which was already at 44%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know you don't speak for the government, on behalf of the government, but just let me ask you this. Objectively, what was the intention of the government coming up with Shif? And actually, what now can the government do to actually even improve the perception of people towards the same? And what now can they do to improve even their acceptance towards the same? If at all this, the government is saying this is the right way.
I think, allow me to put a human face to this conversation, because sometimes we get lost in the rhetorics, in the terminologies, in the political conversation, but we forget that healthcare is a human rights issue.
Very true.
The bottom line is NHIF was such a disappointment over the years. NHIF was also a very limiting health insurance program, because remember, with NHIF, it was not mandatory for everybody to enlist. So give credit where it's due. The country's intention has always been to advance universal healthcare coverage. For us to be able to attain that, there are certain standards or parameters that you must put in place. So in the wisdom of the government, they thought it wise. Let us first separate the health insurance program from the authority that manages this program. Because with NHIF, there has been, misuse of resources and all those things. So to curb those weaknesses that NHIF had, so government decides to create what we call the Social Health Authority, which is like the mother of right? Because under Social Health Authority, which is like the administrative unit governing the social health insurance, which now is the insurance program. So that when you separate these two, it becomes probably easier to even achieve effective management. I think that's one of the intentions. But now the challenge we have is that, one, like she said, there was an issue of trust deficit that had already dwindled because of the poor performance of NHIF. Of course, the public is suspicious that this is just another avenue for corruption. So that in itself does not endear this program to the people of Kenya. But over and beyond that, there are also other living challenges that we all know. For example, as you collect from the citizens from their salary, because the new program literally requires almost every citizen of Kenya to enlist. Irrespective of whether you're salaried or not, you are required to somehow enlist. And it cushions everyone somehow.
Yes.
But now the problem is, if you go to like where I come from in Nambale, just the other day, a young man sent me a video on my WhatsApp. He had taken the father to a dispensary, a local dispensary. Empty shelves, literally. A local dispensary that is the biggest government health facility in that constituency. A constituency with a population of almost 80,000 Kenyans. They cannot access quality healthcare because, one, there are no personnel in that facility. Number two, there are no medications in that facility. So even if you enlist or enroll for SHA or SHE, then you walk into government facilities and you're not able to access their services. how does it help? So I think probably what government ought to have done, if you ask me, beyond the PR, is literally a program that defines serious infrastructural improvement that goes towards ensuring that the healthcare workers are readily available, and by hiring more, you see the way we hire more teachers, more whatever, we hire more doctors, more health practitioners, so that you have all these shortcomings arrested, well in advance. Then ensure that even the collection that is coming in is so transparent that government can be able to track it to the last coin, which I think under the CS for Health has really alluded and probably provided some confidence amongst the public by giving assurance that they are seized of the whole process. So there are things the government is getting it right. And by the way, Eugene, if government gets right on this one, it will be a game changer even for the presidency. But for them to get it right, it doesn't just stop at the point of collection, because that's where Kenyans are fighting. Beyond the collection, you want to walk into a health facility and not be told, don't go to Mama Lucy because there are no medications. Transfer to Kenyatta, I don't know to where. People want accessibility to these healthcare facilities at their convenience. They want to ensure that the doctors and the nurses are highly motivated to offer quality services. Those are the simple asks from Kenyans.
Just something to interject.
Yes.
NHIF did not have a trust deficit. Kenyans had already warmed up towards NHIF. They had very much trust. Things like Linda Mama, the uptake was very high. The trust deficit is with SHA, because already based on the amount of money being deducted, yet when Kenyans go to these facilities, the systems are not working. When approvals are made, the providers are also not paid their services. The other thing, the teachers already complained that SHA actually turned them down. They could not be enrolled into SHA. And the reason SHA gave its reasons is because it does not have enough structures across the country. So what that tells you, this government was in haste to collect money from employed Kenyans, the 2.75, where we don't know where the money goes, instead of first setting up structures. For example, they should have first set up that digital system. You should have first ensured all the facilities in various counties are actually functioning. They should have ensured the human resource for health is actually functioning. The other thing is that when they tried to involve, the public, they did not allow public participation. So that's why the social contract of SHA is very low. They actually decided on behalf of the citizens, yet the citizens were demanding, why don't we retain NHIF and improve it along the way? Already NHIF was a moving bus. In as much as it was slow, it was moving. But now with SHA, we have seen the halt of very many services, and in the process, many Kenyans have actually died and buried their loved ones, which we can say that these lives will never come back. So the government is actually responsible for those deaths.
But it's good to also get clarity, because are you saying that NHIF
Buluma, I know you have
is actually very efficient for Kenyans? Because I think a majority of Kenyans were opting for private medical insurance because there were struggles. You would go to a hospital, they're saying they can only pay for the bed. This one is a bit more improved.
With 44,
and I think it's only fair to give credit where it's due.
No, we are giving...
And your question was from an objective point of view, because I have my own sentiments which I have given, highlighting practical situations. I agree with you on the front where government facilities are not even, health infrastructure is pathetic. And those are things government should prioritize over and beyond just collecting. Because you see, if you collect and then show people this is the roadmap, you'll build their trust. If you show people that we are planning to set up equivalents of Kenyatta across the 47 counties within a time frame of 2 years and equip them, we are planning to recruit X number of doctors and nurses over the next period. We are planning, that kind of an arrangement. Kenyans might, because Kenyans don't even care about all these shenanigans of, I don't know, this is working. They just want, when I walk to a healthcare facility, I get quality services. I'm not turned back because there's no medication.
And Buluma, let me just ask you this, because we have had a critical issue in our country where every government that comes in actually, then they come up with their own plans. As a country, and actually even the world, we've had Vision 2030.
Yeah.
We're now talking about 2063.
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah, in Africa. And we've had all these things. And actually, during Kibaki's time, we had midterms.
Yeah.
Actually, what was to be achieved.
Yeah.
It therefore meant that this blueprint was to be followed even with the successors of President Kibaki.
Yeah.
But now we realize that when every president comes, they come with their own
Agendas.
legacy projects, what they want to do. This is what I want to do. Uhuru had his, Kibaki had his, and of course, but this is actually affecting the country,
Yeah.
and it is costing us economically because there are certain projects which are started, but they never end.
Yeah.
And then other new projects begin. Why so? And what ought to be done there to ensure that we are actually consistent in our projects?
I think two things. One,
Yes.
Political leadership is more of a social contract arrangement in the sense that it's renewable every 5 years. And probably citizen priorities also shift over the life of one presidency, according to me. And what I think is that, when governments go to campaign, they campaign based on certain manifestos. And Kenyans either buy or reject manifestos.
Okay.
Like in the last election, a good chunk of them bought the Kenya Kwanza manifesto and rejected the Azimio manifesto. So one of the key obligations of government is to ensure that they live up to the expectations of those manifestos. But again, these manifestos are also not developed outside context. Like within the Kenyan framework, the operational document is a Vision 2030. So your manifesto somewhat must align with that broader picture of Vision 2030, but now include things like universal healthcare are incorporated in the Vision 2030. Remember, when Kibaki implemented the universal free primary education, it was in the Vision 2030. So politicians just are supposed to tweak their manifestos to suit the bigger vision. That is why the president is very confident when he says, when I read the Azimio manifesto and the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, if there are any differences, probably is in the wordings. But the context, the text, everything speaks to almost the same
A better
language. Yeah.
Okay.
But the problem where it arises is that most of our leaders, when they look at the Vision 2030 and they come up with their manifesto, is because they are looking at areas they can loot and make money and defraud the Kenyan citizens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I want us to move to another issue, actually. And Buluma, permit me to begin with you, actually. And this is because President Ruto actually visited China. And of course, it has got its outcomes and economic implications. And that was in the 2025 visit to China, actually, that resulted to upgrade ties to new level. Of course, we had both leaders pledging an all-weather China-African community. Yeah. Then we also had deals including SGR extension to Malaba and a major highway with 750 million euros secured for manufacturing, agriculture, tourism. It seems like all these things actually these are actually bringing infrastructure benefits. But potential debt risks actually are debated. These are conversations Kenyans are actually having. More loans. We are drowning in more loans, actually. And what does it actually even mean? Because we have 20% of Kenya's 20% of external debt is actually Chinese. So there's a bit of debate whether Kenya's leaning on China boosts its growth or deepen actually resilience or reliance, to China. What are the economic implications of the visit to China generally?
Yeah, of course, there would be implications. And just to provide information, I have a strong background on international relations up to master's level. And this debate has been there even in classrooms as to, alliances or allegiance towards East or West.
Yes.
I think when Kenya Kwanza was campaigning, there were the impression that was created was that they would lean towards the West.
Yeah.
And I think as the year began, there was that deliberate intention that you'd actually see even the relations between our president and former U.S. ambassador, Meg Whitman. There was a leaning towards the West. But along the way, I think we lost something along the way, because I suspect the Gen Z protest might have contributed significantly, because the challenge with leaning towards the West sometimes comes with conditional grants or loans. The concept of Bretton Woods institution, the IMFs, the World Bank. So if you are leaning towards them, they come to your country, yes, they give you good loans and all that, but based on certain arrangements. And sometimes those arrangements are what triggers the kind of protest we saw. Okay. The finance bill of last year was largely a response to some of those things we are talking about. Okay. So I think what the president has done is what President Uhuru and President Kibaki did. Okay. They leaned towards China, which is a bit more flexible. But of course, there are also risks, like the ones you've pointed out.
Initially, we had an alignment
policy
by
I feel
our
like
founding fathers, actually.
Yeah, I feel like for our context, when it comes to conflict situations, yes, that's when probably we pull that. On the economic front, I am not persuaded that we've been non-aligned entirely, especially after 2002. Because we've always either taken sides economically towards China or the West. President Ruto has just gone back to China. And not that we didn't have a rapport, but I think where he sits now, politically, in the current political environment, it only favors to go the Chinese route. Because you see, the Chinese will come, they will tell you, we have no terms and conditions, we will afford this amount of investment, but based on the following interest. Yes. You know, China, they have already defined their interest. In fact, what we should be asking ourselves as Kenyans is, on what strategy are we going to China? Because that's a fundamental question. Okay. Chinese know the strategy that is bringing them to Kenya. Okay. They have what we call the BRI project, BRI program, the Belt and Road Initiative, which essentially aims at connecting their market to, like a circuit of some sort. And Kenya sits as a strategic entity towards that end. So the Chinese are coming to us readily prepared, even mentally, knowing for us to negotiate with these people, we only need to meet threshold X. But you see, Kenyans, we are going there to beg even more. Okay. That's why most Kenyans are concerned. Again, there is a question of the SGR. Remember, the SGR was surrounded with secrecy that ended up now, at some point, even saying there is a possibility that the Chinese will take over the Mombasa port. So the worries Kenyans are having is that, are there more secrets that are boiling up from this trip? Okay. Such that tomorrow, yes, we'll see the expansion of that road, and we really are looking forward, especially those of us from Western, the dual that is going to be put from Rironi all the way to Mau Summit. Will it come with such terms and conditions, such that if government is not able to honor the obligations, what happens then? And then the other question would be, there are also rumors or discussions that China normally, in a corruptly fashion, buys these kind of deals. So, sometimes, and that's why government must come out very transparent and actually outline our visit to China and tell this, beyond the projects, these are the terms that we were given. These terms are more favorable than what President Uhuru was given, so that you build the confidence of Kenyans around it. If you've noticed, some Kenyans were even already on social media, throwing some funny flyers saying the person who appears on this photo does not represent the opinion of Kenyans.
I understand. Let me just ask this, because one of the critical issues worrying Kenyans, even as we get more loans, is the issue of corruption. When you mentioned Bretton Woods institutions like the IMF, World Bank, these institutions have their ways and conditions actually before they give you the loans. They have consistently been giving us loans. Don't they ask us what we did with the funds they had given us earlier? That is question number one. And when you talk about an alignment, with the East or the West, because if you talk about the IMF, the Bretton Woods, if they have conditions actually which are detrimental to our economy, why do we still insist going to the IMF, which has actually worse conditions, and not to Chinese? And actually, then how do we even balance to ensure that this wealth that is brought into the country is actually sufficiently used for what it's meant for. Because you've raised a very pertinent question. You talked about there's an investor who is saying that Kenyans, the major issue, they speak so big, yet they do not have execution. The execution policy. They actually do not know how to execute. So how do we go about it?
We must understand the political philosophy of the West when it comes to Africa. The aim of the West is for Africa to remain as raw material exporters, but never for Africa to industrialize. So the World Bank, the IMF, the Bretton Woods, the McKinsey, their aim is to ensure you remain at that state. So you become consumers of end products, but you become the exporters of raw materials, but then they become the thinkers, the ones to add value to those raw materials. They do not want Africans to be the one adding the value and us exporting those products we have manufactured ourselves. Once you understand that, they have to keep you in perpetual debt. You know, every time, have you ever met a person who's always in debt? They cannot develop, they cannot innovate, because every time it's a circle. You're going round in a circle, round in a circle. So that is the intention of the Bretton Woods, the IMF, the World Bank, and the McKinsey. Remember, the West, they believe they should be at the top of the chain. Africa should be at the bottom. The Asian continent should be at the middle. So they believe we should be the raw materials producers. Then the Asian communities are the ones to do the manufacturing and all that. Then the West is to be the thinker. So they tell Asia what to do with the raw materials. You produce the raw materials. Now, when now China has overtaken, you see the war America is having with China is because China has overtaken. China is now becoming the innovators, the inventors, the producers, which the economically has elevated their people, which to the West, they don't like it, because now the Americans, the Europeans are living in worse conditions in comparison to the people in China, okay? Now, China decided to play in this geopolitical, global power, the kind of thing. Now they are coming to Africa because they have known Africa. We have a lot of raw materials. Now, remember, when they are also coming, China does not want you to industrialize also. They don't want you to do, because where will they sell their products that they manufacture? So our leaders, because of that corruption kind of state, you know, they are so selfish. They don't think big. They're not visionary. They only look at their stomachs and their few generations. They don't look at Africa as a holistic. Then they become easy baits of these institutions. So the reason why you find like now Kenyans are wary, why President Ruto is going to China. Remember, our constitution says we should only borrow when it comes to loans that are going to do development. So during Uhuru Ruto kind of regime, some of the money that was borrowed never even landed in this country. That's why we are trying to see the money you took from Eurobond, the money you borrowed from where is it? Because if we are paying 70 shillings for every 100 shillings, that is 70% of our GDP is going back to paying debts, then Kenyans are wondering what is going on. Now, when we see William Ruto going to China, we're asking ourselves, first and foremost, will that money that is going to be given in China land in this country? Number two, is he borrowing? Because already I told you in the physical space, we have a huge deficit, right? Is he coming to come and pay salaries? Is he going to come and do recurrent expenditures, which is against the constitution? Number four, we are looking at when he's doing those deals, what is the transparency with it? What is the conditions being given in China? It should be given to broad daylight. And as I'm grateful about the public participation bill. I don't know how far it has gone, whereby we need to discuss what are you going to do with the money. Remember, the Adani deal was so secretive. Why it not be being exposed? We could not know about the deal. So it is high time now we put the leadership, the parliamentarians, the president to task. You've been given $100 billion by China. What are you going to do it? Where is it? What were the conditions? That document should be released to Kenyans to look at it, read it, and say, because we are the same people who are going to pay back that debt, either through taxes, either through some certain things being denied from us, or what we are calling austerity measures, where some people have to be fired, or some money has to be deviated to do maybe hospital, now it has to be deviated toward paying debt. It is us Kenyans who are going to suffer. But we have to realize at the back of our minds, we as Africans, we have to rise to the occasion, and we have to realize when the West comes to help you, when the East comes to help you, it's not so that Africa you can industrialize, but you can remain at the bottom state of the chain, where you're only meant to be just raw materials producers, and that's the end. So the moment any person tries to bring their head to try and elevate Africans to industrialize, that's why they're really much fought very hard. When you look at some of the Pan-Africanists, Magufuli, Gaddafi, and all others. So when the Vietnam guy talked about why we talk a lot is because it's by design. Even the people who come into power, remember these the Asian countries like China, America, they always interfere in our politics, even determining who gets to the position and power. So they look at the person who is easily compromised. I know we have also heard about the economic hitman, how they compromise countries through their leaders so that you are not able to develop, so that they can keep extracting our minerals. Remember, one of the rumors that was going around is that China, with the deals that President Ruto was going to do, is that China is going to be given a certain, I don't know whether it's northeastern or some reserve somewhere land to extract minerals in response to this loan we are being given from China. I am yet to verify that, but that tells you when there is no transparency, because we are fearing, Kenyans are actually feeling we are actually being auctioned. Remember, there was the issue of the port sometimes back that if Kenya defaults on the loan China has given unto us, our port is going. So Kenyans are now saying no. They have to tell us what has been auctioned for us to get that loan, and that loan, where is it going? Because we know some loans we get, they never land in our country. They go to Swiss account and some other islands where they're called tax-free kind of islands.
So actually, when we talk about all this, the issue of economy, the issue of debt, cost of living, and of course also the tax frustration is actually what I want to get your view generally on. And this is because the Kenyan economy is now marked by cost of living crisis. The public debt at 70.2%, if I'm not wrong, of the GDP. At inflation of 6.8 at nearly at the early 2025. Now, the evidence leans towards a high debt driving economic strain. We're even seeking actually a new IMF deal, if I'm not wrong. Scrapping the 3.6 billion program. This actually even will beg even the question, because we had a president who said, I cannot run a country with debt. Anyway, that is a conversation for another time. But we have the public frustration centers on taxes, with calls for job creation, debt relief. What is your take on these critical issues that actually are, I don't know whether to say, are inflicting Kenyans? And even as we look forward to 2025 finance bill, what are the expectations of Kenyans? What do we expect?
I think what is the reality is that our appetite for debt is really unmatched and is something to worry about, because most of the time it's always the easier option for our leaders. We are not adopting innovative ways around our finances, around our economy. A lot of the time we are busy just, moving from one continent to the next one to collect more in terms of debt. And the saddest part, or the tragedy in this, is that our own leaders actually acknowledge the debt burden is a nightmare in this country. The tragedy in leadership is when a leader knows this is a problem, but they cry over the same problem. I don't know where they're expecting the solutions to come from. Secondly, because of high cost of living, the spending power has also gone down. People are looking for ways innovatively to evade taxes, so that they don't give government. And then we are also losing a lot of money to corruption. It's only in Kenya that we are on record where a president said that we lose 2 billion every day. 2 billion every day.
That's a lot.
If you do that math, we should not even be going out there to ask for any debt, to be very honest.
We're already rich.
And then the greed that is manifested in our leaders sometimes is also frustrating, because everybody wants to get into that space for their own welfare. It's not for the welfare of the people. And that's why in my preamble when I was starting, I made it very clear. We must define what leadership is. In fact, I dare you, in all your forums, when you're asking about questions of leadership, ask that person first of all, what is their definition of leadership? What is their understanding and appreciation of leadership? Because we're getting it wrong there. You have blind leaders leading blind people. That's why we constantly end up in this debt. That is why the level of trust has dwindled over the years. It's very difficult right now for government to make any progressive decision, because every move they make, it is perceived to be for their own benefit. And it's simply because this debt burden has gotten to Kenyans. It has led to shifts in terms of the currencies. You have the dollar, which I think when I was growing up, it was playing at almost 80. Right now, even it coming down to 130, people are saying that's a privilege. We are doing very well. And yet we know where the dollar used to be, you know? So those are fundamental questions, and it takes visionary leadership to answer those questions. It cannot be answered by selfish attributes of leadership. And then the other thing is, we are starting to behave like some funny countries in Africa where the few oligarchs who are in positions of power, you know, brag about their wealth and what they own. In a country where people are still living below the dollar. In a country where people are languishing in poverty. In a country where we've been discussing about poor infrastructure in the health facilities. Yet you have the audacity as a leader to wear a jacket that you can brag about, to wear a watch that you can brag about, and you are still eating from the taxpayers' money. That is literally spitting at the very people who entrusted you with the responsibility of leadership. So for us to actually get ourselves out of this, I think the president needs to be intentional. They've been talking about modeling our economy around Singapore, but they need to go and interact with the example of Singapore. It's called Lin Kwa something, the prime minister of Singapore, jailed even his own siblings for corruption. That is how bad Singapore it was. They called him a benevolent dictator because he was very deliberate about his action against corruption. If today, the amount of money that is being stolen in counties can be recovered, you know, how do you explain, Eugene? Today, when you are campaigning for governorship, you are worth maybe 50 million Kenya shillings. Within a span of 1 year, now you are worth over 800 million or 1 billion. You saw it even when the vetting was being done in parliament. And I wonder why the members of parliament were not really keen on these questions. Because at one point, there are people who are being vetted and they said, I was worth, say, 400 million. All of a sudden, within just serving in government for maybe a year, that person is worth 800 million. And you tell me we are living in the same economy that is struggling. So does it mean that economy is only struggling on the lower cadre of Kenyans? And then the ones who are on the higher cadre are not struggling? You know, those are the fundamental questions. Before we even talk about borrowing from China anymore, we should be addressing those questions. And then the last fundamental thing, and I'm glad she's built on it, the question of secrecy around some of these deals government is getting into. Remember, you have a social contract with the people. And we passed a law called the Access to Information Act that requires disclosure of such sensitive information. Because a loan that I'm paying for, I should be able to know what's the deal, you know? And to a certain extent, we need to get to a place where there is public participation on whether we should borrow a certain loan or not, so that Kenyans are consciously aware. Mbadi is on record telling us we are not yet out of the woods up until 2032?
Yeah, 2034.
2034.
34,
Imagine that. And he's saying that very proudly without telling us how much he's recovering from corruption before he comes with a new finance bill. And let me tell you, they are taking this thing lightly, but it might backfire on this government again. If they had the Gen Zs last year, the Gen Zs were not opposed to infrastructure development. They were not opposed to Kenyans financing their own development. But they were opposed to mismanagement and arrogance and, you know,
corruption,
rubbing it off on them on how you've made money over a short time frame. That is what the Gen Zs were fighting. So if you come back with a finance bill and you have not addressed those questions, they will still oppose this finance bill. I can bet on that. Because they'll be like, what is different with this finance bill? You have not shown us any progress from our last conversation. You know, remember the president actually went on X to actually participate in a debate, public debate with the Gen Zs. And at some point, even some of us felt they were disrespectful because they are too honest for this life, you know? And they told him as it was. They told him, we have no problem with you. We just want you to get it right. And then finish and we'll leave. Like every other president. But you see, the government is not keen on responding to those concerns that were raised. But they are very keen on now discussing how do we adjust the finance bill to finance another debt of 70%, which is 70 shillings of every 100 we make goes back to that.
What is the common man's expectation of the finance bill that is to come? What do they expect?
For me, when I look at businesses, they are looking at tax reliefs. Some of these harsh taxes that were imposed on many businesses to the point they're now shutting down, they're looking towards that. I think also they're looking at how will the business environment be, to allow business to thrive, because when businesses thrive, they're able to employ more Kenyans. They're able to actually, whatever revenue William Ruto was looking at, this is where he would have really, ensured a very, very favorable business environment. Number two, it should allow new businesses to crop up, because Kenyans are hardworking people, but the way things are going, he's stifling everything. When you say 2.75 for SHA, when you say 1.5 for housing levy, which the employer at some point is the one who is actually going to contribute towards that. That tells you in its essence, you will be forced to, recruit very few employees so that you're able to match up with what the government is actually going to do. Now, the other thing is that if right now we know that 40% of Kenyans live below the poverty line, I hope you are aware of that. That translates to around 20 million Kenyans. That means in urban areas, a Kenyan living in the urban area cannot afford to have 266 shillings to actually somehow eat even 1 meal in a day. And when you go to the rural area, getting 130 shillings is very difficult for that individual to have a meal a day. And these are rural areas where they have farming lands and all that. So if 20 million Kenyans are actually sleeping hungry, and for mind you, even the food they're going to eat is not a balanced diet, meaning their health status is also going to be affected with a shamble of a healthcare system we have in this country. In essence, you're telling a poor Kenyan, you just die because there's nothing much we can do for you. That is very, very bad for this government. So I would wish this government should relinquish some of their policies to ensure, for example, they should ask for tax relief, even to say exemption for a period of even 2 years, so that businesses can, rebuild. They're able to pay salaries. And when you pay salaries, somehow that payee will go back to the same government. But when the government becomes so strict, so harsh, so, very, very rigid when it comes to relinquishing some of these things. Now they want to introduce an eco tax. They have introduced digital tax. When it comes to electricity, for example, we are still at 4 gigawatts. So at 4 gigawatts, we have rationing of electricity. So which business, any manufacturing cannot even thrive. Even the cottage industries, Kenyans can actually do. I know he talked about the last mile of electricity, electrification in the rural areas and other areas that don't have electricity. But we are yet to actually see that. He just says verbally, but kwa ground we are saying vitu ni tofauti. So if he can ensure at least the energy sector, the road sector, tax reliefs for these, tax exemptions for some of these businesses, so that any businesses that is going to be set up by the young people, for example, the creative industry, they should not impose these taxes on young people. Let them recoup that income, because one way or another, if I set up a digital setup, I'm going to employ 4 or 5 other youths. That way, they're being absorbed into the system. Yeah.
Permit me to go to the next question because of time.
Okay.
And this is also another critical issue that has raised conversations and scrutiny and criticism from all parts of Kenya. And this is on the NGCDF, called the National Government Constituency Development Fund. You are the CEO of Kenya Youth Parliamentarian Organization. And of course, you are a Kenyan. You understand this concept. Of course, it has been reinstated by MPs in 2024, despite a 2023 court ruling deeming it unconstitutional.
Yeah.
It faces a 2025 Supreme Court review, actually, and a sect of political class believes it's time to scrap it off, citing sustainability concerns and duplication with counties. Now, audits have actually shown mismanagement. The debate is whether NGCDF is a vital tool or a politicized relic, with the future sustainability actually in question. And permit me to begin with you, Buluma.
First of all, let me make it clear, these are my personal views, not in my capacity as CEO.
Yes.
Because there'll definitely be a conflict of interest. Most of my members are running CDFs.
Yes.
Most of them, like I said, are some of the best performing members in terms of the best CDF management. We need to first appreciate where CDF is coming from. At one point, we didn't have devolution. So CDF was the most relevant government program that allows the citizens to directly have a say on some of the resources that get to their level. Because by the time CDF was created, it was a model that even other countries, including Zambia, was coming to learn from Kenya. By then, the Zambian CDF is borrowed from what has worked in Kenya. As far as the debate is concerned, is largely because, one, the doctrine of the doctrine of separation of power. I think most critics are very concerned because at some point it becomes very difficult for parliamentarians to effectively manifest their oversight role because sometimes it is used as a carrot to dangle them to vote in certain ways. And you've seen that enough times. When government wants to maybe push a particular interest, they would peg it on, if you don't want to do this, then let's reduce CDF. Then the MPs would compromise. So that debate has been there. And then the second concern has been the whole discussion around, now that we have devolution, do we still need CDF? But also proponents of CDF are saying, in as much as you have devolution, there is more to show at the constituency level than at the county level, which I quite buy into it, because the schools that have been built, if you go to Kiharu, you don't talk about Muranga County government, you talk about the CDF of Ndindi Nyoro and what it has been able to do. If you come to Kibra, when Ken Okoth was the MP, the amazing infrastructural, modernized school programs or development programs are unique because of CDF. So CDF has that special place. Only that maybe the discussion that is healthy is not to entirely remove it, but just critically analyze what the role of the MP should be vis-a-vis other functions of government, especially when it comes to the context of separation of power. And then also, to remove it would be a challenge.
Yes.
Because most people pegged their campaigns on what? On CDF. Everyone who went to campaign, they kept saying, my manifesto would be, I want to build more schools here, I want to increase what, those kind of things. So there is that challenge again. So is it the best time to do away with CDF, or do we need another referendum and say, scrap it so that it doesn't feature as a campaign issue? And then finally, is the whole question of what are the expectations of the beneficiaries of CDF? I know there are many people who can give testimonies. Because of bursary, they've been able to go through school. There are many people who can say the first time they've seen a whiteboard in their classroom is because of CDF. What is the voice of those people in this conversation? Because, like I said, beyond the political rhetorics, beyond the dictionary words and whatnot, we must remember there is a human. What is the expectation of this human who's benefited from it? How do we protect and cushion them from such a drastic decision that can deprive them of an opportunity that has been working for them? If anything, why is it that counties are busy now also devolving the equivalent of CDF at the ward level? It means there is something working about CDF that we must strengthen. The only thing we must do also is depoliticize it. And that's the debate we must have. It must be a candid debate, featuring parliamentarians, but also featuring experts and professionals who can give guidance to this country based on solid, objective opinion.
Thank you.
My opinion is that CDF is unconstitutional. We should follow the constitution. It is undermining the constitution. Number two, it is a duplication tool. Already there's devolution. Why should we have CDF? Number three, the role of the MPs is to legislate. Let them focus on legislation. Let them not focus about development. Their work is to put policies, laws, to ensure this development actually take place. They should be running after those corrupt governors. We should be seeing them, being put in jails because the parliamentarians are actually doing their actual job. But also the same CDF has brought a lot of inequalities. For example, when you talk about the bursary, me who lives in Kiambu, when I get a bursary of my child for 5,000, but the one in Marsabit is getting a bursary of, let's say, 2 million shillings or even 200,000, there's already an inequality in that, because most likely the MP there focuses on paying school fees for that child for the whole 4 years. But me who is in Kiambu or Nyeri or wherever, I'm only getting 2,000 or 5,000. Number 4, the development of schools. For example, some counties, maybe like Turkana, if your MP decides to eat all the CDF, but someone in Keharo has been able to actually develop schools and all that, there is already an inequality in that. So what we are saying is that let the legislature focus on legislature. Let the county governments focus on implementing, doing its function on delivering every pertinent issue to the grassroots. That was the aim of devolution. CDF aim was to go to the grassroots. Now devolution has come on board. We're already on the grassroots, so that this money that was actually being given to the MPs now can be directed to actually those development. And that's why one person said, for example, all those bursaries we are talking about, each MP is giving the bursary, if it's consolidated and put in one fund to actually ensure there's free secondary education, so every child will actually have access to education, all free university education. Every child will now have access to university education, irrespective of where you come from. So for me, I would advocate that we as Kenyans should actually defend the constitution and propose that CDF to be scrapped off completely, so that now when an MP is actually gauged, is based on what laws have you legislated, what policies have you brought on board to improve the lives of Kenyans. So then now when it comes to the governors, the CEC, now we'll tell them what have you done with the development money that has actually come to her, so that now, sometimes you wonder, who do you hold hostage? Do you hold the governor hostage? Do you hold the MP hostage towards all those roads?
Even the MCA.
Or the MCA. But when now there's a clear distinction, now the citizens will go for that MCA of that ward. They will go to that governor and tell them, you are the one in charge of development within our county. And then if the governor says that the national government is not releasing funds, now we go to the same MP. Why is the national government not releasing funds to the county government to ensure development is actually taking place? But when you have mixed, interaction of functions, everybody can say that is not my job. I remember there's a road in Githunguri. It has been a tug of war. The county government says it's not mine. Then the MP says this is national government. It's not under my CDF. Yeah. And so that road for a very long time has not actually been developed. Let me
also just ask this as an interject.
Yeah.
Because there's also been conflict between the county and the national government.
Yes.
On some of the projects actually that what the county should do and what the national government should even then do. How do we even demarcate, if at all to use that term, to avoid this conflict? Because sometimes the county says the national government does not give us sufficient funds. Is there a law, or then should we, because I remember during BBI, there was to be introduced a law of the minimum amount of money that should be actually be given to the counties, and then it was to be. It's
already in place. The law is there. Counties are supposed to get, by the constitution,
yes,
I think a minimum of, is it 15 or 30%?
15.
15%.
15 to 45%.
So what the BBI was proposing is to increase that amount to go to 35%. Because
the 15 that you talk about, is it sufficient to, if you compare it, actually, if you juxtaposition it to now the roles that have been given to the counties?
Yeah, it should be sufficient in a way, only that the amount of functions that have been devolved are also more. So the discussions were that, how do we make sure that this goes up to 35%, so that counties have more resources? But now, I also have a problem with the counties. And I think we are not doing enough to really oversight counties. How do you explain to me, Busia County, we never used to get even 1 billion worth of allocation. Now, we are getting that 1 billion in addition to the revenue the county is collecting. But I can't see value for that money. 1 billion should literally shift the economy of that place. We are still ranked the poorest county in the country, Kenya. How is it that a county like Murang'a that is getting their own share of revenue, you can be able to see practical things happening within Murang'a? And yet we are not asking ourselves the right questions.
Okay.
This question of people saying, oh, this is a function of national government, this is a function of county, is all gimmicks. The reality is the constitution has clearly demarcated roles.
Yes.
Healthcare is a devolved function, by the way.
Actually, there's another conversation, Buluma, on whether we really need counties or whether we really need to relook at counties, or rather the demarcation, whether we really need 47 or we need 8, because, and actually the idea, or what actually they bring up, is that the county is actually spending a lot of money paying people salaries, and then there is less for development. And actually, that was according to some data actually that was given, like Nairobi had zero for development this year, 2024 or so. So they are then asking whether we should assess whether we really need 47 counties.
We need even more counties, if you ask me. We just don't need too much bureaucracy with these resources. You know, most of us actually on this table are not old enough to appreciate where this country has come from. By the time we were growing up, there are people who had fought so hard for us to even be asking questions about whether we need counties or not.
Okay.
At one point in this country, if you read the history of Kenya, it was a one-man show. Everybody had to pledge loyalty to one man for them to get even just a minute of development in their area.
Okay.
It is what actually led to the birth of the idea of, can we devolve these resources so that every Kenyan feels that like they belong? Because some areas, depending on how you voted, were disadvantaged.
Okay.
You would find like if you voted in a certain way in favor of Mzee Moi, the priority government programs will come to your area.
Okay.
So you find there is a very imbalanced development across the country. But right now, the citizens, the counties have an opportunity to determine their destiny. But that's not what they are doing. And that's why the debate must be, like, for example, in the case of Nairobi, why would we allow all the money to go for all other things other than development? And yet, devolution is supposed to be development-oriented. So that when there's development, you don't even need to hire more people in the county. Naturally, the economy of that place will open itself. People will be busy with their own businesses, bringing more money to the economy of the country. But you see, that is the ideal situation, but it's not the practical one. Because we need to strengthen our county assemblies so that they are able to perform their oversight roles more effectively and call out governors. Why would the County Assembly of Nairobi be sitting with a budget committee and a budget for now development? Even as we blame the governor, why would they allow that to pass? It's like you're saying a budget of Kenya Ipite, and there is not even one single component that is speaking to development. That is killing the country.
Okay. Quite much interesting. Let me just ask you the last question as we come to the end of this conversation. If you allow me, Director, because I'm being told time is so bad. Some of these questions we are raising here have been raised by politicians. One of them is Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga has been known to be a critic of the government for the longest time. And today, we are talking about a Raila-Ruto pact that was seen in March 2025. When you talk about that pact, was it entirely, because the question has been, when we now see some of the allies of Raila Odinga speaking or even shunning or criticizing the very government of President Ruto, that the ODM actually gave some members of some of its leaders actually to be ministers in. When you see Nyong'o, Orengo, Sifuna, they're actually criticizing this government. There's actually a lot of questions actually that people are asking. And now even Raila Odinga is asking certain questions, now criticizing the government on how it's doing or working with devolution and on NGCDF, which is also against some people in government. So there's a lot of questions on the sustainability of the pact, whether it will hold towards 2027, or what is even its future.
So the pact would hold to 2027 because the voice of the people, all the Kenyan citizens are now the opposition. Raila Odinga is no longer the opposition leader. The moment he decided to go to bed with William Ruto, who is oppressing Kenyans. So for that mere fact, we Kenyans Kenyans are now on the opposition side. So Raila should not delude himself that he's now leading the oppositions. Kenyans decided to take it in their hands to actually be the oppositions and to fight this government that is actually oppressing them. So Raila coming on board to try and talk about the issues pertaining Kenyans and whatever is affecting them, people are feeling he's not actually, he's being very much hypocritical. Remember, even for example, for Nairobi County, where everybody is told when you go to the Capitol Hill, unakuwa mweupe kama pamba, you know, you are cleansed and cleaned. So also Raila Odinga is an enabler of corruption in this country. So putting just those two words I have just said, that is an enabler of corruption, that tells you there's no more hope in Raila Odinga. And what will happen, because I know Raila likes riding on in the consensus of the Kenyan people, he will definitely want to move away, because already he has realized this government, the social contract of the Kenyan citizen with this government went away in June 25th when he killed Kenyan citizens, young Kenyan citizens. The contract ended. And now Kenyans decided, you know what, we are done with this government. So Raila is feeling that heat. And some of these people like Orengo and Sifuna can see that they experience it on the ground, because they are with the Kenyan citizens and they can hear what Kenyans are talking. He can hear even the dissatisfaction of this Kenyan citizen. So they are also giving him the message.
Yes.
But Kenyans have told him, come 2027, Raila, Ruto, and that all cohort of bad leaders, you know, all these boomers, all these X-generation who have put us in the, you know, in this mess we are in as a country. Now the Kenyan citizen has said enough, they will all go home come 2027.
Thank you so much. I know you would want to give your rejoinder on it, but I'm also curious to know, because and this is a question I've been asking, that the Gen Z people are saying Ruto must go. Do they really have a plan of making Ruto go? And what is really this plan that will make Ruto go? Because we are seeing the opposition now, everyone is like, I'll be the president. And actually yesterday Gachagua was saying, oh, he will also contest. So everyone in the opposition is to contest. Eugene Wamala believes he has to be the president. Yeah. Kalonzo Musyoka believes this is the time.
Yes.
Martha Karua believes this is the time for ladies to now take the mantle. And everyone else believes, and actually the other time even the opposition was telling, Raila, if you want to become the president, we can actually make you the president. It is now your time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, if you look at the opposition, they're actually not quite stable. But permit me to ask you the final question on the same issue that I've been asking, because when you talk about the political pact between Ruto and Raila, whether it will hold, we've had the analyst actually who have actually opined that the future analysts actually they predict 3 scenarios, and one of them is the pact holds still 2027, boosting Ruto's re-election. Number 2, it collapses, sparking ODM's exit, or Raila runs independently with uncertainty, shaping 2027 politics and public trust. And this even begs me to wonder, in 2027, could we see what happened in 1992? If I'm not wrong, is it 1992? Where the president won with 30%, 70% opposition. But of course, I know that
2002 or
it was in 1992 when Moi actually won with 30%, if I'm not wrong. Is it 97 or 92? And we also had the Matibas and the Kibakis, actually, all of 92. Them. Actually, it was 70 with 70%, but different people actually had. Yeah, so
it was 92.
So how do we see 2027 now unfolding? Of course, now that we understand that we are in a different. In a different constitution, generally, which it is now 50+1. So I know I've asked a lot of questions, but that is my final question.
I will try and locate myself in responding, as also give a parting shot. One, it is clear that the political landscape is adjusting post-Gen Z protest. It is also clear that we should not rule out the Gen Z possibility. I know there are alliances that are shaping up. There's the Gachagua, Kalonzo, Matiang'i alliance that is coming up. But we are also not lost to the fact that I know people will rule this out, that Gen Zs have a possibility of also saying, Eugene is our candidate because he represents certain values, and we are going to marshal all our votes around him. And that would be a factor in this coming election. Contrary to what people think, me, I'm interacting with these Gen Zs every other day. People are planning, people are plotting. Do not despise them. Don't think the BBC just happened today. That documentary that you've watched. Remember, it's just coming almost a few months, is it a month to the next, to 1 year anniversary of the protest? It's not by coincidence. It's to remind the Gen Zs of the journey they have come. It's to remind Gen Zs that they are heroes that must be. Their legacy must be carried forward. That documentary today is to reawaken the energy that was there last year. The other thing you need to understand is that Raila's in between government and outside government is very intentional, because Raila is also those type of leaders who like listening to what the ground man is saying. And I think the feedback he's getting is that if you move that direction, you're moving on your own. A good chunk of your supporters might not go. And then the second thing is that he is also at a place where he's risking his constituent of voters to William. Because you see, remember what happened to Uhuru last election. By the time Uhuru realized that Ruto had gone with the mountain, it was too late. And it was simply because they had a pact. And Ruto realized that for me to get to this pact, I need to start elevating new generation of leaders. I want you to observe what's happening in Western and the new noisemakers in Western, and then compare that with the discomfort from a distance of Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Wetangula. Then you'll start understanding why Raila is playing both hot and cold. That's why a section of ODM is in government. The louder section is out of government, saying, no, we are not in this broad-based. Us, we are just coming to give them experts. So that they leave the door open.
And those who are in are quite silent.
Yes, so that they leave the door open.
Okay.
When the time is ripe, they will just say, Bwana William, sorry, Bwana, we've tried helping you, but it's not worked. These country people are so... And then remember, there's the must go chanting that keeps coming up. So you don't know the implications of that. But let's assume the ideal situation, that this marriage lasts to 2027. It will be a fairly smooth ride for William, because contrary to what she's saying, Raila still commands a significant influence in terms of the Kenyan population. I can tell you, as someone who comes from Western Kenya, and I have campaigned there for government, not for Raila, I know the hurdles we went through when you could stand in a matanga and say, huku juu si mtapatia William. Watu wanawambia, tawe. That is the level of command. To the extent that when President got elected, this is the last example, there's a time he visited Busia. Do you know what guys were doing? He's going to the main stadium. They take the picture of Raila. They put it in the middle of the road as a roadblock. So every car must slow down, pledge loyalty. You know the way you see the roadblock of police, you drive past the photo. That is the level of influence this guy has. But that is not to say that this cannot also be challenged by the Gen Z protest. We must keep giving hope to the Gen Zs. Thank you.
Wow.
By parting shot.
Yeah.
Do not underestimate the silent majority. These are the people who don't come out in those campaign trails or those functions that people think about. And the silent majority are saying Ruto must go. Raila will go. And now we want a new crop of leaders who actually have empathy towards Kenyans and the plight of Kenyans. So the current elites or political class is actually fearful. They know the power of the silent majority. They are the ones in their homes. They are the ones in their chambers. They are the ones in their banks. They are the ones behind their computers. They may not come out. They may not come to those functions. But when 2027 comes on board, the silent majority will come out boldly to make a statement. And that day, I am praying that I'll be alive on that day, God willing, that we will see the transition of this nation from bad leadership to a new generation of leaders or aspirants who actually put the nation first. Gone are the days. Raila's time is up. I don't know why we recycle leaders. Their time is up. They have been there for many years and they have done nothing for this nation to actually make it progress forward. So the silent majorities are the ones who are going to send Ruto home.
And watch out for Babu Owino. Watch out for Ndini Nyoro. And the next generation of leaders. I've seen Salasi has declared interest for presidency today. Have you seen that? He just declared. So it's going to be an interesting... because again, our generation is also claiming leadership. Because the Gen Zs have come too fast. The millennials, we have yet to even taste this leadership.
Okay.
So if we keep delaying again,
Yes.
we might actually be overtaken by the Gen Z. So we need to actually get there so that we prepare the way for them.
Okay.
So if you're a millennial, please
Yes.
aspire for next leadership.
Wow. Quite an interesting conversation here with the CEO of Kenya Young Parliamentarian Organization, and of course, the health economist and policy analyst Beatrice Kairu, and of course, Buluma. Thank you so much for the candid insights that you have actually given. And the call is that Ruto must go and Raila must go. But the question will be whether the generation that we have currently is ready actually to make change, is actually ready to actively participate to make the change and to take the mantle from the old guards. What strategy do they really have to make this change happen? Well, we will continue updating you of how things unfold even to the run-up of 2027 and get to know, but there's a lot of questions and issues actually to get to critically look into, and that is what the power table gets to do, to then chew these critical issues into bolluses which you, our viewer, can even then swallow. Well, on the power table, we bring insights, we bring issues, and we get to help you understand them. Well, my name is Eugene Kwach, and I've been your host. Till next time, a good night.